Hello and welcome to the Passion Driven Pioneers interview series. I am your host, John Channon, and today I'm joined by Jeff Aguy, who is the CEO of 2043 Corp. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me on, John. Really excited to be on this podcast, especially with kind of all the change makers and pioneers that you have in the community and that we get to hear their voices. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, that's what we like to do. So usually we just start with give us a little brief background as to who you are, what you do, and then the business that you're in.
Sure. So I'm from I like to tell folks that I'm from a small village in Haiti. Spent the first 7 years of my life there. Where I'm from, innovation isn't a buzzword used by business people. It's the difference between life and death. And this idea of innovation has been a strong part of my life. And currently, I've been a startup founder for the last 14 years. And the company that I work in every day is it's called 2043. And we're a strategic advisory that focuses on economic development. The three pillars that we work on most is innovation, infrastructure, and workforce. Our clients are typically cities, municipalities, large foundations, and corporations. So we strategically advise senior leaders. And what makes our company unique is not only are we strategic advisors, but we're also able to implement the kinds of change that we're proposing. So,
Okay, great. So you mentioned, you were from Haiti and, but what was that spark that caused you to want to start this type of business?
yeah, so specifically for this type of business, I'd been working, I'd been a startup founder for about 10 years. I work on several different industries. I actually used to be the vice president and economic development chair for the Minneapolis NAACP as well. And this was around 2020. Started this company right before the pandemic. Actually, I started it, and then the next week was the pandemic. And what led me to start this was I began to notice around the ecosystem where folks who were in government, folks who were in the private sector, and folks who were in philanthropy, we all were concerned about economic growth. But the reality was everyone had a different approach. It's as though we were speaking different languages while we're trying to communicate. And when everybody wins, everybody wins. So I had a unique opportunity to consider going into venture capital. And the thing about venture capital is, really, if you look at startups or companies as seeds, a venture capitalist is trying to find what is the best seed to invest in order to grow that kind of company. And if 2 out of 20 in your portfolio does great, then you are doing really well. So if that's your batting average, you are doing really well. Well, for me, I thought about as it related to starting this company was, what if we looked at the soil rather than the seed? And what if that soil was the environment? And so what 2043 is we partner with the private foundations, with local government, and at times state government, and and corporations in order to supercharge the environment to make it easy for anyone to start a business. So if you think about having a super environment, I mean, a regular seed can succeed really well. A regular seed can grow in soil that's supercharged. And I think that there are much more regular businesses like my mom and my dad, like my dad who started his business in Haiti, and like so many people who I know, that you're not necessarily trying to build this billion-dollar unicorn. No, you just want to build a really good business that makes money, that allows you to take care of your family, that you can employ people. And so for me, a lot of those companies were being overlooked. And so we started 2043 to focus on that environment. That was like our first iteration of it. And we've made some significant change, and I'm proud of that.
It sounds like you're a little bit like an economic development center or corp or co-op. Is that a good way to describe it?
Yeah, so we work a lot with economic development organizations. So the best way to describe it is, consider that we're doing two things. One, we're advising the power brokers, which create economic policy. So that's the city. That's philanthropy, who's trying to figure out how do they put out dollars. And that's the corporations who benefit from the innovation in the environment. So we advise those leaders on what are the best strategic decisions to make in order to both benefit them as well as benefit the economic environment. And then from there, we are also the ones who implement those plans that they create if they so choose to move into that next stage. So we're not quite a co-op. We're a corporation where we used to be a specific benefit corporation, which meant that we are a for-profit, but we have a kind of a benefit report that we filed. And one of the things that we found was that it was confusing to people because some folks would think that we're a nonprofit, and then others would know that we're a for-profit, but would focus more on the social benefit. And we thought organizing as a corporation has been the best approach to do so. So we do spur economic development, even though I wouldn't consider ourselves an economic development organization. We would more fit into the category of management consulting.
Oh, yeah, I was going to kind of say something to that effect. So I
Yeah.
appreciate the clarification because that was good.
Yeah.
So, so let's just talk about, you're running your own business. You've been doing this for a while. As you came into it, was there anything that you bumped into that maybe you didn't expect, or did you have any misconceptions about running your own business that you kind of had to overcome?
Oh man, so not as much with this one because this is my sixth company that I've started, but I'll go back to the beginning when I started my first company. I was 21 out of college, and I've always been blessed and a benefit for people who want to support me. There's a lot of misconceptions that I thought of when I started my first company. The first one was we got office space, and it was nice office space and all these things. We spent a lot of money on operations, and most of my clients ended up being out of state, and so we're spending all this money in operations that ended up not not being a benefit for us. But I would say the most important thing that happened was so my background is in industrial psychology. So I have a degree in industrial psychology. Half of my classes were in business, and half of my classes were in psychology. It was recognizing that a lot of the stuff in my business plan, there's a quote that's I forget who it is, but that says all good plans last past first contact. Like you can have whatever plan you want, you can spend all this time making this business plan, and when my product or my service at the time hit the market, it was completely different than what I thought. So I had spent all this time making a business plan when really I just needed to have a strategic plan and start from somewhere. And so when you're first starting your business, really your role is to survive and pivot as much as possible. There's the idea that you have in your mind. And then when you put it out in the market might say not the right price. The market might say sometimes not the right market. Maybe you need to move somewhere else. So in our case, we were based in Tampa, Florida, but most of my business was outside of the state of Florida in general. And so what the market told me was I'm in the wrong environment. And so those were a couple of the changes. I would say the last thing that really surprised me was how much, when you're first starting out, especially, people say this all the time, it's about who you know. But when you're first starting out, especially, a lot of times it's not about your marketing, right? It's about your relationships. And so when I first started my first business, I became a member of the Greater Tampa Area Chamber of Commerce. And that's where I learned most of the businesses are actually doing business with each other, especially if you're a B2B. Like for me, I was a B2B. And so, yes, your marketing is important, but the value of your relationships, that's what's going to translate your business from, your first few clients. Still to this day, a number of my clients are by referrals. So the number of referrals and relationship driven customer acquisition was a big surprise for me. I thought, you learn how to market, you do all these things. Now it's like at the advent of social media in 2012. So I'm thinking, I understand social media and all those things are cool and good. You can get clicks, you can get likes, but a lot of times your first few clients are who you know.
Yeah, I've heard that several times. You don't have to have the perfect business plan. You just have to be able to adapt and pivot, and you should get started sooner than later. So great. I appreciate you sharing that. So I'm going to change a little bit. So in your business, right? How do you stay, adaptable, open to change, and innovative?
Yeah, I think it's always about recognizing the market, right? The biggest thing I think, especially for business owners who are passion driven, business owners who are value driven, right? Business owners who believe are mission driven. I think sometimes we can lose the reality that business really is defined by service or goods for a profit and focus so much on the change that we're trying to make, we don't actually have the capital to make it. And so for me, I really look at the environment. How like my company has, especially 2043, has morphed from, as you can imagine, we launched a week before the pandemic. And we quickly began as a research company, again, recognizing what was missing in the market. That shifted when the pandemic happened within 2 weeks. And so the value proposition that we offered to the market in that moment was my deep relationships within the entrepreneurial community at large. And so our first couple of clients was working with the greater MSP for them to determine what's going to be their response after the killing of George Floyd. How are they going to support entrepreneurs? How are they going to support entrepreneurs as a result of the pandemic? It meant partnering with a Knight Foundation who was thinking about what are some innovative solutions that they can come up with in order to help entrepreneurs across the board. So we developed data and surveying in order to survey entrepreneurs across the country, but specifically in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Fast forward a year later, my company researches in the background, but it's not our primary value proposition. Our primary value proposition is the fact that we've engaged, or, at first starting with me, but then also with our team, that we've engaged senior leaders in all 50 states and 2 US territories. So when you're strategically advising with 2043, you're not getting just a local perspective. You're getting a national perspective. And recognizing what's happening in the market, I think, is one of the biggest strengths that you can bring as an entrepreneur. And that means that, like, you might have the best idea, you might be really great at something, but the market might shift. And so recognizing what are the needs. I think the second part is, as an entrepreneur, I try to always work at the intersection of two things as a business owner. I strive to work at the intersection of the greatest need and those who have the capital. Oftentimes, you'll have people who have need, but then you end up doing a lot of that work for free. And if you're passionate about it, you'll be tempted to do that. And I've done that a lot in my life, because it's, again, you're passionate about it, you want to do it. Or sometimes you'll work with people who have the capital but don't have the need. So at the intersection of need and capital, I try to focus our customer acquisition at that level, and while scanning what's happening in the environment, and it's been really helpful for us.
I'm going to change the subject a little bit here. I know naming your company 2043 has got a specific type of meaning to it. Why don't you share with us that meaning? And then would you mind just offering us a glimpse into your future plans and goals that you have for your business?
Of course. Thanks so much for that, John. So I named the company 2043 because my son was born on January 19th, 2020. And for me, I really kind of got an idea of who I was as a person at 23 years old. And so he'll be 23 in 2043. So it always reminds me of why I'm doing this, what's at stake, what matters. The second reason why I named it 2043 is I believe this is before OpenAI, this is before all those things. So I have my master's degree in leadership, creativity, and innovation. I focused a lot on innovation, as we kind of talked about earlier, in that the environment of which we live in is going to drastically be different. For me, by the year 2043, I think right now we talk about inequity, we talk about all these challenges. I think by then it'll be about existence and non-existence. And so if our groups of, if our different sectors don't work together, the results will be that not only will we have and have-nots in terms of our economy, but it would be a complete destruction of our way of life. And so for me, giving myself 23 years to help solve that, which means that I have to work with senior leaders, which means I have to work with people that think differently than me, which means I have to work with people that have different experiences. And so every time that the name 2043 comes up, it's a reminder, for one, I think of my son, and two, I think about the need for the world needs more translators, right? The world needs more people that are going to go into difference, that are going to navigate difference, that are not just going to see people that are different than them because they grew up in a rural area or grew up in an urban area, or they happen to be young, or they happen to be Black, or they happen to have different views for them. But I think we either work together to create the world we want to see, but due to technology advances and other things that will happen in our environment, if we don't do that, I think as humanity, we're in peril. So that's why I named it 2043. Big thing to look forward to is our in the year, end of 2025, 2026, we're looking to enter the European market. Actually, I'm going to Germany in a couple of weeks as in our first trip. I'm exploring the European market, is expanding more globally. So we're a national company. We've worked with different folks across the country, but we're looking to expand internationally. That's like what's in our immediate future. Secondly, focusing more on the capital aspect of it. Again, we strategically advise institutions. We work with senior leaders, but one thing that keeps coming up is having capital in order to make strategic investments. And so that's more of kind of like our midterm goal for us is having the ability to leverage our partners who have capital and are saying, would you guys ever consider allocating capital? And that's something that we're thinking of very strongly, and personally, both the company and myself making a shift more towards finance in the next 2 to 3 years.
That's quite a bit. You know, here in White Bear Lake, our city has a sister city over in Germany.
Oh yeah, which one?
I can't remember that off the top of my
Yeah,
head, of
so
course.
yeah, so I found out about that sister city piece. So I'm part of a fellowship called New Bridge Fellowship, and it's part of an organization, Atlantic Brücke, in Germany, and it's a private-public partnership over there that are continuing to build that economic, social, civic bridges between Germany and the U.S. And I've discovered that we have all these sister cities all across the country with places in Germany. I think Hamburg is one with St. Paul, the city. So
Probably.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was thinking, you know, if you're working with city governments and folks like that over here, you might want to find out if they have a sister city over in Germany.
That's right.
You
That's
get a
right.
good referral because I heard referrals
That's
are
right.
important.
That's my strategy. That's why Germany's our first our first market. Try to leverage that relationship.
Oh, that's great. All right. So, you know, recognizing that this show is really targeted to those folks that are going to be in their first few years of business, you know, do you have any final thoughts or words of advice you'd like to offer to the audience today?
Oh, thanks for asking that, John. When I think about myself and where I was my first 3 years, it felt like the most exciting thing in my life was to start my business. And then the most challenging thing in my life was to realize no matter how smart I was, I had to keep changing. I had to keep growing. I had to keep adapting to the environment. So I want to remind you, if you're in your first few years of business, that you're here, you've made it. Your business hasn't shut down yet. Most people don't make it past the first year. Most people don't make it past the first 3 years. And then 85% don't make it past the first 5 years. So if you're here, if your company is still open, even if your company has closed, I've had a couple of failures as a business owner, but I didn't view myself as a failure. So my advice to you is no matter what you're going through or what's happening in your business, don't view yourself as a failure. My favorite quote is from Nelson Mandela. It says that I never lose. I either win or I learn. And so please view entrepreneurship as a learning opportunity. You might have a bad year, you might have a great year, but over time, if entrepreneurship is a sport, you will become a veteran that is so good at it. So don't view yourself as a failure and remember why you started your business, and that will propel you through.
That's a really good quote. So I appreciate you sharing that. So thank you so much for your time today, Jeff.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for having me on, John. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it was my pleasure because it was actually great meeting you, learning more about your entrepreneurial journey and the fact that you've started up 6 businesses. I think is great. And so I think you're a great resource in the communities in which you're working now and for what you're doing. So to everyone watching out there, I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.